She was 26 years old. She was 2 semesters from finishing her nursing degree at Keene University. On the morning of March 22, 1994, Linda Marie Schultz left her apartment on Cedar Hill Avenue in Westfield, New Jersey, walked to her car, and drove away. Her roommate heard the door close at 7:40 a.m. She never arrived at class. That is not a story about a young woman who changed her plans. That is a story about a man who had already decided what was going to happen that morning, who had been inside her orbit long enough to know her schedule and her route, and who spent the next 30 years living within driving distance of the town where he had taken her life, attending cookouts, buying groceries, coaching youth soccer, hiding in plain sight behind the most ordinary life imaginable. It would take 30 years, a cold case unit that almost didn't get funded, a DNA sample extracted from a stamped envelope, and a daughter, Linda, never had the chance to know she was carrying, to finally force a name into the open. But before we get there, we have to go back to Westfield in the spring of 1994. Because to understand what was taken from Linda Marie Schultz, what was truly, permanently taken, you first have to understand who she was. Westfield, New Jersey in 1994 was the kind of New Jersey that people from outside the state never quite believed existed. Not the turnpike, not the refineries, not the billboards for personal injury attorneys, but a genuine small town with a real downtown. A train station with flower boxes, and a main street where the hardware store had been owned by the same family for 40 years. Union County. 45 minutes from Midtown Manhattan by rail, but a different world entirely. It had a town pool, a 4th of July parade, a Saturday farmers market that shut down Cedar Avenue from 8 until noon. People who grew up there came back. People who moved there tended to stay. Linda Schultz had come to Westfield 2 years earlier from Hazlitt, on the Jersey Shore, the daughter of Raymond and Patricia Schultz, a retired electrician and a school cafeteria supervisor, who had raised 3 children in a split-level house 6 blocks from the water. Linda was the middle child. She had a brother named Kevin, a younger sister named Denise, and a habit, according to her mother, of adopting every stray thing that crossed her path, cats, plants that other people's neglect had nearly killed, college classmates who needed a couch and a meal. She was the kind of person who remembered what you'd told her 3 months ago and asked you about it. She had enrolled at Keene in 1991 with the intention of becoming a pediatric nurse. She worked nights and weekends at a diner in Clark to cover her expenses. Her nursing instructors remembered her as one of the most naturally calm students they had. The kind of person who, in the middle of a simulated emergency scenario, made everyone else in the room slow down just by being steady. She drove a green 1989 Honda Civic. She kept a handwritten study calendar taped to the inside of her kitchen cabinet door, each week color-coded with a highlighter. She had plans for May, for summer, for the fall semester. She had a roommate named Jess, who later said that Linda always checked the lock twice before bed, not from fear, but from habit. She was the kind of person who made sure things were secured before she allowed herself to rest. On the evening of March 21, 1994, the two of them ate leftover pasta at the kitchen table, watched the tail end of a game show, and Linda went to bed early because she had a clinical practicum the next morning. She set her alarm for 7. She was out the door by 7:40. That was the last time Jess saw her whole. At 9:15 a.m., Linda's clinical supervisor at the hospital marked her absent. Linda had never missed a practicum without calling ahead. By 10 o'clock, the supervisor had tried the apartment twice. No answer. Jess returned home at noon. She found Linda's coffee mug rinsed and upside down on the drying rack. Her study calendar was open on the kitchen counter. The apartment was exactly as Linda had left it. Her car was gone. Jess called Raymond and Patricia Schultz at 12:47 p.m. Raymond arrived in Westfield by 2 o'clock. By 3, he and Jess were at the Westfield Police Department. The officer who took the initial report noted in his log that the woman had been gone fewer than 8 hours, and that young adults sometimes changed plans without informing their families. Raymond Schultz told the officer that was not his daughter. The officer said he understood and that they would follow up. Linda's green Honda Civic was found at 4:52 p.m. that afternoon, parked along a residential side street 3 blocks from the Cedar Hill apartment, Orchard Street, a quiet block of colonial homes with mature oaks that arched over the road. The car was locked. Her shoulder bag was on the back seat. Her clinical binder was on the passenger seat, open to that day's date. The keys were in the ignition. She was not there. The Westfield police declared Linda a missing person that evening. Union County detectives assumed the lead the following morning. A search of the surrounding area, the county park 2 blocks over, the wooded corridor along the rail line, was conducted over 2 days. On the afternoon of March 24th, Linda Marie Schultz was found in a wooded area behind a commercial property on the border of Westfield and Cranford. She had been there since the morning she disappeared. The Union County medical examiner determined cause of death was asphyxiation. She had been strangled. She was 26 years old. There was a partial shoe print in the mud near where she was found, a men's athletic shoe, size 11 or 12. It was photographed and cast in plaster. There was a single synthetic fiber recovered from her jacket, dark green, consistent with a vehicle's interior upholstery. And there was one more thing, recovered from Linda's jacket pocket during the autopsy, a small folded piece of paper with a phone number written on it in handwriting that was not Linda's. It was a New Jersey area code. The number, when called by investigators, rang to a disconnected line. A phone number written by someone else. In her pocket. On the morning she died. What had passed between Linda Schultz and whoever had written that number? That question would not have an answer for 3 decades. The detective assigned to lead the Schultz investigation was Sergeant Diane Ferreira of the Union County Prosecutor's Office, a 12-year veteran who had worked violent crimes, and who, by her own account in a 2008 interview with the Star-Ledger, had never worked a case that frustrated her the way this one did. Ferreira was precise and relentless. She was also working in 1994, with 1994 resources, against a crime that had left almost nothing to work with. In the first 2 weeks, she interviewed Linda's classmates, her co-workers at the diner, her neighbors on Cedar Hill, her professors at Keene. She interviewed former boyfriends. She pulled Linda's phone records for the 3 weeks before her death. 2 names appeared in those records. The first was a classmate Linda had dated briefly the previous fall. A man in his early 30s named Paul Wary, who was described by mutual acquaintances as having had difficulty accepting when Linda ended things. He was interviewed. He had an alibi for the morning of March 22nd. He had been at an off-campus lab session, confirmed by 4 other students and an instructor. He was eliminated. The second name, appearing twice in Linda's phone records in the 2 weeks before her death, connected to an outgoing call Linda had made to a number registered to a man named Thomas Cade, who records showed had worked briefly as a maintenance contractor at the Keene campus in the winter of 1993. Ferreira tracked Cade to an apartment in Linden. He was interviewed. He acknowledged knowing Linda, said she had mentioned a plumbing problem in her apartment, and he'd given her a number to call. He said they had spoken twice, and that was all. No physical evidence placed him at the scene. His shoe size was 9. He was not formally eliminated, but the case against him could not be built. The piece of paper with the handwritten phone number remained the most troubling piece of evidence. The disconnected line led nowhere. Ferreira ran it through every available database. She had the handwriting compared to samples from every person she interviewed. No match. What she did not know, what no one would know until court documents filed in 2024 made it public, was that the disconnected number had been a pager number registered to a prepaid account under a false name. In 1994, that was a dead end. There was no way to trace it further. Meanwhile, Raymond and Patricia Schultz drove up from Hazlitt to attend every investigative update Ferreira could give them, which became less frequent as 1994 became 1995. Patricia kept a notebook of every name, every date, every detail she was given. Raymond placed a laminated flyer in the window of the VFW post in Hazlitt, where he had been a member for 20 years. It stayed in that window for 11 years. By the end of 1995, Sergeant Ferreira had pursued every lead the evidence allowed. She had not solved it. She told her supervisor she was not done. Her supervisor told her to document what she had and move to active cases. She documented it. She kept her own copy. The case went cold. By 1999, 5 years had passed. Patricia Schultz had attended 2 of her other children's weddings without Linda beside her. The color-coded study calendar that investigators had photographed in the kitchen of the Cedar Hill apartment had been taken as evidence and never returned, a clerical oversight that the family learned about only years later. Patricia kept a framed photograph of Linda on the mantel and replaced the frame twice when the glass got dusty and cracked. By 2004, Jess, Linda's roommate, who had moved to Pennsylvania, married, and had 2 children of her own, still picked up the phone on March 22nd every year and called Patricia Schultz. She never knew exactly what to say. She called anyway. Patricia said that the calls mattered more than Jess understood. Diane Ferreira had left the Union County Prosecutor's Office in 2001 to take a position with the State Attorney General's Division. She still had her personal copy of the case file. She still thought about the pager number. In 2003, she wrote a memo to her former supervisor, flagging that new DNA extraction capabilities might be applicable to the biological evidence stored from the Schultz case. She received a form letter in reply. Nothing moved. The elementary school 2 blocks from where Linda was found had added a security fence in 1998. The wooded area behind the commercial property had been cleared for a small office park. The diner in Clark, where Linda had waitressed, had closed and reopened twice under different names. The world had quietly rearranged itself around the shape of the absence she had left behind, the way water fills in around a stone. Raymond Schultz died of a heart attack in February of 2011. He had spent 17 years waiting. Patricia was 74 years old and still drove to the Union County Prosecutor's Office once a year to ask whether anything had changed. Most years, it had not. Then, in 2019, the Union County Prosecutor's Office established a dedicated cold case unit, one of 5 cold case initiatives funded under a state appropriation that had nearly been cut from the budget twice before it passed. The unit's first case priority list included 14 unsolved homicides. The Schultz case was number 7. Every case on this channel represents weeks of research, verifying facts, and piecing together lives that were lost too soon. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, please like this video and subscribe. Leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We read every one. Now, let's get back to Linda. The case had been cold for 25 years when a detective named Marcus Webb sat down with a banker's box of archived evidence and a legal pad and started from the beginning. Detective Marcus Webb had been with the Union County Cold Case Unit since its first week of operation. He was 44 years old, a former homicide investigator from Newark who had joined the unit specifically to work cases that had run out of road. He later said, in a recorded interview with the prosecutor's office, that he believed every unsolved homicide was a solvable homicide. It was only ever a question of what the evidence was waiting for. What Linda Schultz's evidence was waiting for was the intersection of two things that didn't exist in 1994: modern DNA extraction from degraded samples, and a genealogical database large enough to find a family through distant cousins. The physical evidence from the Schultz case had been in Union County storage since 1994. Among the items logged, the plaster cast of the shoe print, the dark green fiber, Linda's jacket, and an envelope. The envelope had been recovered from Linda's shoulder bag, the bag left on the back seat of the Honda Civic. It was unsealed, addressed in Linda's handwriting to her sister Denise, containing a birthday card. The card had been stamped and was ready to mail. Linda had simply not mailed it yet. The stamp had been licked. Not by Linda. The envelope was addressed in her hand, but the stamp had been applied by someone else who had been at the apartment before she left. Jess, when re-interviewed in 2019, confirmed that a man had come to the door the evening of March 21st, the night before Linda disappeared, asking about a parking dispute on the street. Linda had spoken with him briefly at the door. He had come inside for perhaps 5 minutes. Jess had not seen his face clearly. She had not thought it relevant at the time because nothing had happened. He had helped Linda look for a parking citation form, she thought, rummaging through some papers on the counter. He had handled the stamp. Webb submitted the envelope's stamp lining for DNA extraction in September of 2019. The lab returned a usable male profile. It was submitted to CODIS, no match to any convicted offender. It was then submitted to a genealogical database, the same technology used in dozens of cold cases since 2018, which traces unknown DNA by identifying distant relatives and building family trees backward to a single contributor. The genealogist assigned to the case worked for 8 months. The tree, branch by branch, narrowed. On a Thursday afternoon in June of 2021, Detective Webb received the genealogist's final report by email. He opened it at his desk. He read the name at the bottom. He cross-referenced it against Linda's phone records from 1994. Thomas Cade, the maintenance contractor who had been interviewed in April of 1994, who said they had spoken twice, who wore a size 9 shoe, and who had been quietly set aside. His shoe size in 1994 had been wrong. Webb set down the report. He picked up his phone. He called Patricia Schultz. She was 84 years old. She answered on the second ring. Thomas Cade was 61 years old in 2021. He had spent the intervening 27 years in Union County, never more than 30 miles from Westfield. According to records compiled by the prosecutor's office in the months following the DNA identification, he had remarried in 2002. He had 2 stepchildren. He had been, by every available account from neighbors and co-workers, a quiet, reliable man who showed up when he said he would, did his job, went home. He had coached youth soccer at a recreational park in Springfield for 5 seasons in the early 2000s. He attended a Lutheran church in Kenilworth. He had also, records confirmed, worked as a maintenance contractor at the Keene University campus from October 1993 through February 1994, a period during which Linda Schultz had been a student there. He had been on the campus, in the buildings, in proximity to Linda's daily routine for nearly 5 months. He knew her face. He knew her schedule. When Sergeant Ferreira had interviewed him in 1994, he had given a shoe size. She had accepted it. There had been no grounds to compel him to prove it. Webb spent 6 weeks building the case before moving on Cade. Investigators obtained a discarded coffee cup from the parking lot of a convenience store Cade used on Tuesday mornings. The Dina on the cup matched the profile extracted from the stamp lining on Linda's unmailed birthday card. The match was confirmed by 2 independent labs. The synthetic green fiber recovered from Linda's jacket in 1994 was reanalyzed using current spectrographic technology and found consistent with the interior upholstery of a 1992 Chevrolet Blazer, the model Cade had owned at the time of his campus contract. Confirmed through Motor Vehicle Commission records that investigators located in the New Jersey State Archive. The pager number on the folded piece of paper in Linda's pocket, the disconnected line that had led nowhere in 1994, was traced through telecom records obtained under a 2021 subpoena. It had been registered to an account paid in cash, but the billing address, a post office box, was opened under a name that investigators connected to a residence Cade had used in early 1994. He had written his own number on a piece of paper and put it in her pocket. He had been inside her apartment. On the morning of August 3, 2021, Thomas Cade was arrested at his home in Springfield, New Jersey. A Union County Sheriff's vehicle and 2 prosecutors' office vehicles pulled into his cul-de-sac at 6:50 a.m. His wife came to the door first. She looked at the officers for a long moment and then turned and called his name. Cade walked out of the house in a bathrobe. He looked at Detective Webb. He said nothing. His neighbors, the people who had waved to him across driveways for 2 decades, described themselves to local reporters as disbelieving. One woman who had known him for 15 years said she felt as though the ground had shifted under her feet. In Hazlitt, Patricia Schultz was sitting at her kitchen table when Kevin called her with the news. She said later that she put her hand flat on the table to feel something solid. Thomas Cade was indicted on first-degree murder charges in September 2021, faced with DNA evidence from 2 independent laboratories, fiber analysis, telecommunications records, and a genealogical case built over 27 years of accumulated evidence. He entered a guilty plea in March of 2023. He was sentenced to 30 years without parole. He was 63 years old. He offered no statement. He did not look at Patricia Schultz, who sat in the front row of the gallery with Kevin on one side and Denise on the other. He was transported to New Jersey State Prison, where he remained. There is a birthday card that was never mailed. It was addressed to Denise Schultz, Linda's younger sister, for a birthday in late March of 1994. Denise was turning 22. The card was recovered from Linda's shoulder bag on the back seat of the green Honda Civic, stamped and sealed and ready to go. It went into evidence instead. It stayed in a Union County storage facility for 27 years. After the case was resolved, the prosecutor's office released the card to the family. Detective Webb drove it to Hazlitt himself. He did not stay long. He left it with Patricia Schultz, who opened it at the kitchen table with Kevin and Denise sitting beside her. Inside, in Linda's handwriting, was a birthday message. Denise has said publicly only that it was exactly the kind of thing Linda would write. Something funny, something warm, something that sounded just like her. The Schultz family, in a statement released through the prosecutor's office following the sentencing, said that they were grateful to everyone who had stayed with Linda's case across 3 decades, to Diane Ferreira, who had never discarded her copy of the file, to Marcus Webb, who had started from the beginning without assuming the beginning was wrong. And to the genealogist whose work, anonymous by professional custom, had built the tree that found the man who thought he had been invisible long enough to be safe. Linda Marie Schultz never finished her nursing degree. She never became the pediatric nurse she had been working toward. She never mailed the birthday card. She never met the life that was waiting for her on the other side of that spring semester. But she also never stopped being looked for. Not by her mother, not by her roommate who called every March 22nd, not by a detective in Linden who kept her own copy of the file in a cabinet at home. Justice found her. It arrived through a stamp on an unsealed envelope, through a genealogy tree built one branch at a time, through 30 years of people who refused to set the file down. That is not nothing. That is the only thing that ever really works. What does it mean that Thomas Cade lived 30 feet from ordinary life for 27 years, coaching children's soccer, attending church, while Linda's family waited? What piece of this case surprises you most? The evidence that broke it, or the evidence that was always there? And what should we make of a system that nearly cut the funding for the cold case unit that finally solved this? Leave your thoughts below. Every comment matters. Justice came for Linda Marie Schultz after 30 years. Stories like hers are the reason this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, subscribe. We'll keep looking. More cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for being here.